Welcome to the Legislative District 17A and B Representative Forum, sponsored by the Willmar Area League of Women Voters. We believe it is essential for the public to better understand the views, the opinions, and the commitments of the people running for elective office in Minnesota. This is understanding that better equips voters with information to inform decisions about voting. My name is Jan Dahl, and I'm a member of the Willmar League of Women Voters. Tonight, we will have approximately 1 hour to hear from Dave Baker and challenger Mary Sawatsky for District 17B, Tim Miller and challenger Andrew Falk for District 17A. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes for a closing, and 90 seconds to answer questions that we have received on our league website and also from the audience that is present here tonight. With further ado, I think it's time that we hear from the candidates, and we will start with Andrew Falk with his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Jan, and thank you to everyone who's here in attendance. It's a great event. I really appreciate the debates, and it's a lot of fun to talk about the issues. My name is Andrew Falk. I live on a farm north of Murdoch where I farm. My wife's name is Marnie, and we have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Aria. And she's at that fun stage in her growing up where everything's exciting and she's got one speed and it's just go. I previously served 6 years in the state legislature from 2009 to 2014. We had some challenging times, but ultimately in 2013-2014, we finally got the state's budget back in fiscal balance. It required a lot of work. And it meant we had to work together with the House, the Senate, and the Governor to get the job done on time and on budget. Part of the reason why I'm running again is because I'm frustrated with the lack of progress in the state of Minnesota. We've seen an absolute failure to get the work done on time. The legislature has been dysfunctional. We're seeing gridlock that we'd normally associate with Washington occurring in Minnesota. The failure to get a bonding bill, a tax bill, or a comprehensive fix to our roads and bridges done is one of the things that every single Minnesotan should be upset about. I'm hopeful, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, that I'll be able to work to get the job done on time. We can put people back to work rebuilding roads and bridges. We can hold down the price of college tuition, which has continued to increase. We can fund free preschool for every single 4-year-old, no matter where you live, statewide. And we can work to stop the price gouging and the absolute, I would call it, disgraceful behavior that's going on behalf of the drug companies. The charges, the prices that people are having to pay for life-saving medication is absolutely absurd. Finally, I want to see the corporate money out of our politics. We have seen far too much special interest money being paid for by corporations to go and buy the type of policies that they want. Take, for instance, Reynolds American and Altria, 2 tobacco companies that donated lots of money to go and get a few other people elected. I will have to stop there.
Thank you, Andrew. Tim Miller.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for having us here this evening. I really appreciate the work that you do here and this great attendance that we have here this evening. I believe that government works best when the people are involved. It's been a privilege working with many of you, talking with you, meeting with you, and getting to know what your needs, your concerns, what your desires are. I believe that accessibility to government is a top priority, and I've made that accessibility with the work that I'm doing. Even if we may have disagreed on something, I'd like to believe that we treated each other with respect and we had a good and open conversation. And if reelected, I hope to continue having that relationship with everyone in my district. I should have started with my name is Tim Miller. Jan, you said my name, but I want to introduce myself. My wife, Sherry. We live in Princeburg. We have 7 children. Most of them are out of the house, but we have 7 children and 3 grandchildren, and we're truly privileged for that. There's feedback right now, excuse me. So I look forward to the questions this evening, and I look forward to the coming days ahead, and I'm sure as with all of you, Election day is quickly approaching, and hopefully people can make the decisions that are right for them, and we can make government work for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's District 17A. Moving on to District 17B, Dave Baker.
Thank you, Jan. We're the B team, and we're going to start with, again, just saying hello. My name is Dave Baker. I've been a small business guy here for about 16 years, been living in the Willmar area, Candiac County, for about 25 years. Married a gorgeous lady out of high school, my wife Mary, and we've had 3 great kids. It's been a great honor for me to serve for 2 years in the state legislature. I've learned so much, and I will tell you that there is much more for me to learn. As both Andrew and Tim have mentioned so far, the issues are endless of what we need to do to try to make the state a better place. You know, but Minnesota is a pretty darn good place today, and I'm very proud to live here in Minnesota. I'm really proud to live here in Candiac County. And right now, as we all sort of venture on this job interview, I'm asking to hire me one more time, maybe at least one more time, maybe more. But I want to keep going back to St. Paul until I don't think I can make a difference any longer. And people at the doors ask me, why do you want to keep doing this? It's because I honestly still think I can make a difference. And until I think otherwise, I'll keep doing this if I can make a good change. So we've got a lot of things to deal with. Healthcare, transportation, getting a bonding bill done that I worked really, really hard on. And I am as disappointed as anybody that it didn't get done, but we're going to keep trying because it's what we do. In business, you just don't give up on the first bad idea you have with a restaurant promotion. It doesn't work well. You just got to keep trying. So for me, it's been an honor. I want to keep working hard, and I will do everything I can to make sure the voters in this area know that I would hopefully be the right choice one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Sawatsky.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and for those of you in attendance, thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum tonight. I am a public school teacher of 31 years. I have been a special education teacher in the Willmar Public Schools and New London Public Schools. I am presently working at the high school with students who are deaf and hard of hearing, and I am married to my husband Doug, and we have 2 children. Jeff is a 5th grade science teacher in Painesville, and our son John is a sales rep for a local clothing company. I have had the pleasure of being a member of the House of Representatives in 2013-14, where a lot of great work was started, and we need to capitalize on some of the work that was left undone. I am running for House of Representatives because I like making good policy, and good policy takes time, patience, and working together to get things done. The chaos at the end of the past 2 sessions has been a source of embarrassment for the state of Minnesota. And as a public school teacher, I start the year and I end the year with my students, and I don't get special time with my kids. And when we elect legislators to lead our state, knowing that you have a finite amount of time to work in St. Paul, come back to home and find out the needs and concerns of our county, and then go back, that takes leadership. My goals this legislative session is to provide predictable and sustainable funding to our schools, finding solutions to our broadband internet system so all Minnesotans have access, also to fund our roads and bridges, and to find real mental health solutions for Minnesota.
Thank you. Well, you've all brought up subjects, and guess what? All the questions are right here. So we've got a good basis to start with for tonight's conversation. Let's start with infrastructure. In light of the fact that most agree with our Minnesota infrastructure of roads and bridges have deteriorated, what specific budget or bonding plans do you think could be agreed upon and passed to fund it? And that question goes to Tim first.
Thank you, Jan. And infrastructure, as you mentioned, with transportation specifically, is a priority in the state of Minnesota. It's actually referred to in the Constitution itself, so we've made that, education and some other things, a very top priority. In greater Minnesota, roads and bridges are what we're facing, and it's the quality of them, it's the deterioration of them. When you get in the suburbs, you have a little bit of expansion issues and things like that. That's not so much out here. We may have less traffic, but we have more truck traffic. We have people that are using these that rough them up pretty bad. So the question that you asked is what can we agree on? I think everyone can agree that we can fund roads and bridges. Where we don't agree on is things like Southwest Light Rail, to where that takes away from the focus of that attention. We had in the House and Senate, we had transportation bills that derivated fundamentally on, everyone agreed on the road projects, but we derivated on two things: how to fund it. We believe that we do not need to increase a tax to be able to do that, and also the relationship with transit. Now, I'm supportive of transit. I think buses are a better thing than the light rail, and when we have people that come in and try and force the issue with light rail, that causes problems. But we can move forward. We can get the roads and bridges attended to if we're willing to work together. Thank you.
Dave Baker.
Could you repeat the question, please? Thank you.
In light of the fact that most agree our Minnesota infrastructure of roads and bridges have deteriorated, what specific budget or bonding plans do you think could be agreed upon and passed to fund it?
Thank you. Well, what I do know and what I've learned the last couple of years is what's currently going into the rail or the highway fund and the transportation fund isn't enough. So by doing so, what I like to do in my business, I look at every option, everything that we can do to look under to see what can we do to make sure that this long-range plan is actually put in place. I think we came very close last year to creating a current sales tax that is being collected currently on auto car rentals, some auto parts, and those are things that right now get used on our roads that need to be used, and I think that's a good idea that should be explored. So reforming our system is one step. Now that is far from short of what we need to fund the needs of the roads in the long term. We need to do more for rural Minnesota. We need to have rural transit, and we had a really good bill in the House that actually had a 10-year plan. A lot of money was set aside in the bonding and the surplus that we had. But what's happening now this year coming up is we don't know what the November forecast will look like and or the February forecast. A lot of my decisions will be based on that. If we have a large surplus again, it's very hard for me to want to raise taxes on money, on collections that have already been collected by our citizens in Minnesota. If it's tight and we need it, I'm having all options on the table, whether it's a license tab or whether it's other things, other ideas. I'm just saying everything is on the table because I know we need long-range plan for transportation.
Thank you. Mary?
Let's back up a little bit so we are all on the same page about what the transportation dedicated funds are and our taxes that we now pay. So everybody in the state or the country has a federal tax of 18.4 cents per gallon on when you fill up. Minnesota has a gas tax of 28.6 cents per gallon. Now, Minnesota ranks number 25th in the United States, and there are 7 other states that are within 4 cents of Minnesota. So when we talk about in our 5-state areas, Iowa is 31.7 cents, South Dakota 30 cents per gallon, Wisconsin is 32.9 cents per gallon, and the outlier is North Dakota with 23 cents. So when we talk about gas tax and dedicated funds, we need to start there. We do need a long-term transportation fund, and that's the best way to ensure that we get Highway 23. We are $600 million short per year for the next 10 years. So we need to be thinking more about outside the box and start talking about it, and knowing that there are 32 states right now that have a fixed rate tax while inflation is eating away at the prices of what it costs to build our roads. And so with that, knowing that gas taxes are regressive, but there are ways to find federal gas credits for those that are in low-income areas. But instead of having a fixed rate, maybe we need to look at a variable rate design where gas is gradually increased along with the gas prices and general inflation rate in the economy.
All right. Andrew.
Well, thank you for the question, and it's an important one. People keep talking about getting transportation addressed, and CAN keeps getting kicked down the road. We're about $600 million deficient per year going forward, and I heard Tim didn't give a single answer there, but it's going to require some combination of revenue. And he said he was opposed to raising taxes, but they weren't opposed to raising license tabs fees. Now, maybe that'll have to be part of it. But there was talked about the increase or taking money out of the general fund. Let's just do a little bit of math here. They propose taking between $300 and $325 million per year of dedicated sales tax revenue moving it over to transportation. That's $600 to $650 million per biennium. We currently have a $900 million surplus. So if you take that away from the surplus, we have $300 million left over. They also voted for a $2.27 billion tax cut. So had that tax cut been enacted, we would be $2 billion back in the hole. It's also important to note that Southwest Light Rail does not take any gas tax. We had a nice transportation forum where that was articulated to us, although some reason it keeps being brought up that seemingly gas tax goes to there. That's not the case. If people in the cities want to tax themselves to pay for transit, it doesn't bother me. The problem is not getting the work done because you're so held up on one particular project that you go and neglect the entire rest of the state. We have the need to go and address roads and bridges in the state. It hasn't gotten done. It has to get done. It's only going to get more expensive if we keep kicking the can down the road. One of the things I look at, there's a mandatory markup on fuel tax. Maybe that should be revisited.
Dave, this question is for you, and we're going to switch to housing. What will you do to increase affordable housing options so that families can focus on work, health, and better support their children's success in school?
Thank you, Jan. That's a great question, and I know that our county, like many other counties around Minnesota, has a real housing crisis. There isn't enough affordable housing, and there's also not enough workforce housing when people want to move around, especially to rural Minnesota. The one thing families can count on and can succeed with is if they have stable housing. If they don't have a house to go home to or a home to go to bed every night, there's going to be a problem. I carried a bill I think it was 2015. It was called Homes for All. It was a bill that I think it was carried $21 million for the bill, passed our committee. It did not get signed into law because we didn't have quite the funding, and I think that there was about $9 million passed on that. What that money does is it works with private industry, local lenders, to try to create housing projects, to get projects in the areas where they're needed the most. Housing is really important. I get that, and as the vice chair of the Jobs and Energy Committee, that is largely where a lot of the housing bills get originated to. So I'm happy to continue to work on this issue. It's a big, important one, and it's one that we need to keep working with private industry, along with some government inclusion, to make sure that we can find the best private partnership to make this thing happen. But housing is a very important issue we need to continue to work on.
Thank you, Mary.
Housing is essential, one of our mainstays of feeling comfort and safe. And Kandiyohi County does not have efficient and sufficient housing for all people. As I door knock, as I deliver Meals on Wheels, I know firsthand what some of our housing situations are throughout the county. When I was in the legislature in 2013, I passed a $100 million bill that went for affordable housing development. And $20 million of that went in the general obligation bonds for public housing rehabilitation. Now, when we talk about housing and some of the services and organizations that we have around our county, which I think we need to capitalize and really accentuate their good works that they do. For instance, the folks up in the northern part of our county connected to the link, helping to find people who are out of housing temporarily, that might have found themselves in a major catastrophe or catastrophic event that have caused them to lose some support systems there. We have a program called Family Promise in our county that is going from several churches, taking care of those that are homeless. And then also Heartland Community Action has had many programs that are helping with weatherizing homes so that the windows are more efficient and to help people with their poverty issues.
Thank you. Andrew, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. What will you do to increase affordable housing options so that families can focus on work, health, and better support their children's success in school?
Well, thank you. Oftentimes in rural Minnesota, we don't think about the lack of housing, but it is a huge issue. And as Mary talked about, in 2013-2014, we passed more than $100 million in our bonding bill to go and expand public housing, and that was a great thing that was done. I want to see that done again. The talk about doing 19 million or 21 million or some small number of dollars for public housing just doesn't cut it. We need a much larger investment. I look at the surplus, it's one-time money. I think we should be using part of that surplus to do public housing. We should also be doing an equal amount in a bonding bill. I'd like to see $100 million in both areas. We know that when people have housing, the other costs for public assistance are reduced. They're better able to focus on their job. Their kids are able to do better in school. Their quality of life improves greatly. I look at the fact, too, that if we are able to go and use the surplus part of it and a bonding bill, it's a huge influx of economic activity in rural communities. We can put people to work building houses. The local lumberyards benefit, hardware stores benefit, local contractors benefit. It all helps our rural communities. We turn more dollars over in the economy. And so it's a great way to do an influx of capital, and it provides a great return, and it provides so many good social economic benefits. So I am very supportive. I want to see resources put there, but once again, this can't just all be about talk. It actually requires putting forward the money to get the job done.
Thank you. Tim?
Thanks, Jan. I'm actually uncomfortable with government's hands in affordable housing. However, in greater Minnesota, we do have a reality that there is a shortage. And there's a shortage particularly in workforce housing, especially when you get up north, and it's reached a crisis level to where they have work available, but they don't have people that can work there. So I am willing to have the discussion on how the government can be involved with taxpayer dollars to do this. I am very uncomfortable with flat-out public housing. As a child, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and I saw the effects of public housing there. When you don't have a stake in the private sector, either with the owner itself or with the people that are renting, when it's totally a government-handed thing, it tends to be blunt and it tends not to work. So what I do support is if we're going to include taxpayer dollars into this, let's look at some incentives for people to build and expand. We have an issue in that building affordable housing. The cost to do it is more expensive than what they can finance for. So you can have gap financing to where you kind of cover that gap, or you can have some tax credits. But I really believe that putting this back into the market, we have to be careful when we do any of this. Stable housing is the need, but we could subdue the market if we just pump a bunch of money into it needlessly.
All right, thank you. Mary, this question goes for you first. How do we fix the problems with MNsure and the 50 to 65% rate increases in greater Minnesota?
Great question, and that's what we're getting hammered on in the literature in the mail that I'm getting from both sides of the aisle. So first of all, we have to remember that Affordable Care Act has, the uninsured has fallen from down to 4.3%, and we're one of the lowest of citizens having accessibility to insurance. We also have to remember that MNcare was organized by a bipartisan group of legislators, and it was to help us, those with low incomes, have affordable insurance, health insurance. Now, we got to remember MNsure is only a place where Minnesotans can go to receive tax credits to lower the out-of-the-pocket costs. It's not a program for insurance, government insurance, but it is a place where people can go to get tax credits to lower their out-of-pocket costs. And so when we look at stabilizing the rates, we do need to look at the insurance companies and work together to make sure that the insurance companies are being kept in check. We need to explore how to stabilize those rates. We need to focus on the cost of prescription drugs. We need to eliminate the surprise billing, and we need to reduce healthcare waste. And I know that in 2015, the HHS finance chair was a champion to repeal MNcare, and thanks to the Senate.
Go ahead. ahead, Mary. You can
Thanks to the
finish your
Senate, MinCare does remain, and we did not kick off a lot of people, or 100,000 people off of insurance.
Thank you. Andrew?
Just so I have the question correct, would you mind repeating it?
Sure. How do we fix the problems with MNsure and the 50 to 65% rate increases in greater Minnesota?
Well, thank you. This is a really good question. And repeal is not the solution. I know that the Republicans up here like to tout how they voted to repeal MNsure. If that were the case, we'd automatically end up actually in Obamacare, which is the federal exchange. Getting rid of our state exchange removes our state control, puts us right in the federal exchange. MNsure currently provides plans to less than 5% of the population. The reason why we're seeing this go up is we used to have what was called in the state of Minnesota MNsha, which was the state high-risk insurance pool. Anybody that had a pre-existing condition, exceeded a lifetime cap, et cetera, couldn't get insurance in the private marketplace prior to the Affordable Care Act, had to go and buy subsidized health insurance basically through the state. That entire high-risk pool got moved into MNsure. What happened is that all the plans, or nearly all the plans in the state, used to go and have a fee on them that helped to cover that high-risk pool. That fee went away, so essentially you've got people who, through no fault of their own, have had pre-existing conditions, costly medical conditions, other types of high-cost care that's all being borne by the 5% of the people that are within MNsure. Two solutions I see. One, go back to a system where you have other plans in the state helping to go and absorb some of the costs that are borne by that small pool, or else what I would rather prefer see is that require every single health insurance plan that sells within the state of Minnesota to have to participate in the exchanges. Right now they cherry pick the areas geographically where they want to participate, and as a result, specifically in rural areas, we have a lot less competition.
Tim?
Thanks, Jan. Well, who here in this room or who watching on TV hasn't felt the effects of what we're facing now with the health insurance problems? I'm getting calls, emails, and someone walked up to my house before I came over here today to talk about it. There's a lot of technical aspects to it, a lot of statistics. First of all, I want to make a couple corrections. Mary, they don't know the numbers. Those are estimates. Number two, no one is going to be kicked off. That's a misstatement. They would move over to the exchange, so I agree with you. That was our proposal 2 years ago. There's a lot more than that. We know that MNsure is not working. I've thought real hard how to address this, and I think a letter that I got from what I believe is an elderly lady who wrote me probably sums it up, and I'm only going to read a sentence or two from her letter. Dear sir, I wish you the best in November. As a voter, I ask for you to keep in mind the hardworking Minnesotans who have lost all health care insurance. Please be the voice, some of us having to stop all cancer treatment delays on surgery and unable to address the issue of aging pain, yet I'm 6 years short of retirement. Us politicians get involved into the nitty-gritty. We hear statistics, we say, well, it's this and it's not that. This is a very complex issue that we can't fix all in the state. It's going to take the state and the federal government. But we're hurting real people with the stubbornness to say that the current system works. I'm not saying this for political reasons. I'm saying we have to fix things, folks. We have to fix things. We tried real hard in 15 and into 16 to get this stuff changed, and we were rebuffed, in my opinion, because of ego by the governor.
All right. Well, let's.
One more. How about me, Jan?
Dave, yeah.
I just
right to
can't
Dave. Thank you.
wait to answer this one. No, that's okay. This is a really tough issue. And again, just over the last 24 hours, I've received 3 phone calls from very well-respected insurance agents in town. They have been in business for many, many years, selling insurance, and they have now been told Preferred One will not accept any new enrollments in 2017. Also, if you haven't heard yet, Health Partners is not going to be offering any individual coverage in the coming year. So folks, we're down to one, Medica. They are the only individual health care plan that's now going to be offering individual plans. Now, this doesn't affect folks under a company plan, so hang on to that. It's a very vital part of your monthly budgets. But we are at a crisis right now. The wheels have just fallen off. The medical programs that you've been hearing about and dreaming that some people think this is going to get worky, it's going to get better, it's not. I have not been a person to say we have to repeal this. But by gosh, Minnesota was doing a really pretty good job 5 years ago in Minnesota, as compared to the rest of the country. The smartest people on this issue are health insurance agents and insurance agents. They're telling us, Dave, we've gone beyond the point now. We have to try to find a way to get back to how Minnesota used to do this. I'm on the Health and Human Services Policy Committee. I'm willing to start really digging into this thing. We cannot absorb these high costs any longer. We have to do something now.
Thank you. Andrew, next question. Do you support local government aid to cities, counties, and townships return to the 2002 levels?
Oh, absolutely. That's one thing we have to do. And we saw the result of basically the Tim Pawlenty years, no new taxes, when we basically fell from one budget catastrophe to the next. And we finally got our state back in fiscal balance when we actually raised taxes in the top 2% in 2013-2014 and closed more than $600 million with the corporate tax loopholes. My colleagues up here continue to go and say that we raised taxes on Minnesotans, but they failed to go and articulate who it was. For single filers, you had to make roughly $170,000 per year, and you paid an additional 2 cents in every dollar above that. For a married couple filing jointly, it was more than $250,000 a year, and you paid an additional 2 cents in every dollar above that. That money is what we use to go and bring back some of the increases to local government aid. I want to see that get back to the 2002-2003 levels. I believe the last biennium, the House Republicans attempted to cut the program $87 million. They tried to single out cities of the first class. While that may sound good and make you feel good, you know, when they say we want to pit rural versus metro, unless we have enough legislators statewide that support the programs to have enough votes to actually protect them, we in rural areas are at a much greater risk to lose out. I want to also point out that back in 2013-2014, when the Democrats were in control, we brought back township aid for the first time. We put $10 million into that program. The townships hadn't received state aid for quite some time. So yes, I want to see local government aid increased back to the 2002-2003 levels. I want to see the county program aid formula redone and increased, and I also want to see the township aid maintained.
Tim?
Jan, LGA is an important tool for rural Minnesota, so is state county aid. It's effectively the same thing. And there's been a lie that's been perpetrated. I had to face this as I went and talked with my mayors, and they said, please don't cut our funding. We were never going to cut funding in 2015. We put a little bit extra money this last session. They asked for $43 million in increases. We provided $40 million in increase, only $3 million short. The governor vetoed it. Another thing that happened in 13-14 is you hear dollar amounts where this is how much money we put into something, but what doesn't get discussed is the formulas. So like in state county aid, the formula was reshuffled, and although they increased state county aid in 13 and 14 because of the formula, our counties out here actually saw a great reduction. I was at a county meeting this morning, and I had the county administrator look at me, and he said, quote, before you put any more money into state county aid, make sure you change that formula, because the more money you put in without correcting that formula, the harder it's going to get to fix that. So it's always easy to just say put more money in, put more money in, put more money in, but if it's not going to the places that it's needed, then putting more money in only means that you're taking more money from the taxpayer and giving it to just a certain select few.
Dave Baker?
Thank you, Jan. I think my philosophy on local government aid, also known as LGA, is important, especially for small rural towns in Minnesota. They really need to count on this extra funding for police coverage, sidewalks, for street cleanings, those kind of things that they just don't have the tax base to support local taxes like larger communities do. Andrew had mentioned earlier the Class A cities. They are the Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, and they have the ability, if they want to, like any city does, to raise taxes. But when they raise a small amount of their tax percentage, it's literally a couple of cents or a couple of dollars on a household for the year. When a small town like New London or Atwater, Spicer, they raise a tax and they need some of that, it's actually hundreds of dollars on their property tax each year. The difference is real, and the small communities need local government aid. And I support that. Now, we don't have a blank check. We don't have open wallets to just keep handing it out because, as we've talked already tonight, we're trying to find a way to get our roads done. We're trying to fix MNsure and the health care crisis. So, you know, I support LGA and what it does for small communities. We have to make sure we look at the whole balance, the whole budget. Last biennium, we spent $42 billion in the state of Minnesota, the largest budget ever. So we have to make sure that where the dollars are going are smart, and they're going to the folks who need it the most.
Mary?
Due to the inaction of the legislature this year, Willmar does not have $124,000 brought with local government aid to the city of Willmar. New London, $11,000. Atwater, $13,000. Pennock, $5,000. Spicer, about $2,000. We have had decades of cuts, and I do support bringing that funding back as of 2002 funding monies. We all want to live in neighborhoods that are safe. We all want to have our police and our fire departments in full gear. And I am proud to say that I am endorsed by the Minnesota Peace and Police Officers Association. And so we need to show them that they are important and all of our citizens. Now, when we talked last week, we were in Redwood Falls at a emergency medical systems forum, and there they were talking about how in rural Minnesota, how many people, how they're not getting the volunteers, and they're very concerned about the volunteers for the EMS program. And we need to think creatively and help those folks maybe to have some incentives, and because we all want, unfortunately, and hopefully it should never happen to any of us, but we want those ambulances there to help us and our loved ones. And so local government aid is part of that safety, and we need to have that for our communities.
Thank you. Let's see, the next question, we will begin with Tim Miller. Tim, what is your plan for funding pre-K education?
Boy, you let me start off with this one, huh? So, there is a very strong effort underway right now to, they call it school readiness, pre-K. We have all-day kindergarten now they want to move it into pre-K. And I see this direction going where there's kind of a dark running joke that pretty soon we're just going to back the school bus up to the hospital. And I was in a meeting last year where that was quite literally it. It was a 0 to 4 curriculum. I am not supportive of a complete overhaul of preschool to where the state of Minnesota comes in and greatly expands this. Now, this might not be popular for some people, but I think that we have to look at things different than just another funding mechanism to expand in an area where parents need to be more involved, communities need to be more involved. Some of the schools that I talk to don't want this preschool program. There are in-the-weeds issues about how the money is spent, where it's going to go, and it's just this big, gangly government program when we need to address the actual needs. If you want to know a real problem, we have daycares. That's a huge crisis out here. Let's address the issues with daycares. Let's address the issues with working moms being able to get home and spend some time with their kids rather than just putting a new government program on how to raise our kids.
Thank you. Dave?
Universal pre-K, again, as I have talked with a lot of our districts in the area, school districts, the buildings aren't quite ready for that yet. I am one that will also agree that teaching children 0 through 5 is the most important time that there is. But also, I know that we can never get enough for K through 12, so now we're adding on another grade level. And so my concern is let's make sure that we have it funded properly, what we have already promised, K through 12, and then let's start looking at expanding this in a very smart manner. Currently, we did a lot of new funding for the early education scholarship programs and school readiness. This is a program that quite honestly helps the families that need it the most, that gives them scholarships to send their kids to school. This is paid for by our tax dollars, and these most urgent and most critical kids need that care. So I was very proud to support large increases in early education as well as K through 12, because I know their schools are my future employees. They need to have good teachers, well-paid teachers, in good buildings. So I'm a friend to I'm a friend to education, but we also have to make sure that before we just slap out a universal pre-K, we have the funding and the long-range plan to fund it properly. And I don't think that we sometimes always have K through 12 right. We got to make sure we do that, and then we'll expand it. But this is a big issue, but I'm very supportive of early education.
Mary?
A couple of weeks ago, we had the Minnesota School Board Association out here in Wilmer, actually, at WEAC, and area school board members and superintendents were in attendance. You two were in attendance and did leave early, so I will explain to everybody what their agenda is for education. You are right. You did provide $25 million worth of grant money in the early program. However, that left out 60% of the districts in the state of Minnesota. When they were asked how many of the districts in this area, of the people that were represented at that meeting, just a couple of, well, Wilmer did get a part of the grant, but others said, you know what, this is another divide between rural and metro, because when you're providing grants, just put the money on the formula. And don't forget, you're right, K-12. And if we have universal pre-K, we need to worry about that, and then also K-12. However, quit the gimmicks. And I think you both missed that message. Don't do the gimmicks. Just give us money on the formula. Because guess what? When you have a grant, that is one-time money. And then all of a sudden, you have a program going, and then the next year, you don't know if the money is going to be there because it has to come out of another pot. And so the superintendents and the school board association, school board members that were there in attendance said, put money on the formula, make sure that we have good teachers in our classrooms, and because we do have a shortage.
Andrew?
Well, I fully support universal pre-K for every kid, no matter where you live in the state. And I have to say that I think a few people up here have a strange sense of humor in one sense, because pre-K is not a joke. And the idea that they put large increases in, that is kind of a joke. Governor Dayton fought tooth and nail to actually get the funding for early childhood education. The Republicans in the House took us to within 2 weeks of a government shutdown because they refused to put money into education. Remember, we had a special session because they couldn't get the work done on time? They couldn't figure out that we actually needed to fund education instead of giving tax breaks to corporations. We have the money to do this. If they want to go and give money to corporate tax breaks, maybe we don't. If we choose not to do that, choose to invest in our kids, invest in every 4-year-old, then we have the resources to do it. I look at the fact that out here, specifically in rural Minnesota, what was passed is incredibly anti-rural because many rural school districts do not have the ability to offer preschool or free preschool. Benson was fortunate. Their school district, they were able to get a grant, they were able to offer it. Where I live in the Kirkhope and Murdoch-Sunburg School District, they didn't get a grant, they are not able to offer it. So I'm incredibly frustrated. The fact that the lack of willingness to go and actually put adequate money into this brought us so close to government shutdown is an embarrassment for the legislative process. This is something that should have been done. And for all the arguments about this is going to massive government overreach, the same people said the same thing about funding all-day, everyday kindergarten, and I think that's been a huge success.
Thank you. I think our time is really running short, and so if you can make your answers a little quick with this one, hopefully we can get in one more question. What are your feelings on Citizen United? And Dave, we start with you first.
Citizens United, as I can understand it, a federal program for campaign finance that puts high dollars into campaigns. Is that correct, Jan?
It was a court decision.
Court decision, Supreme Court.
Yep.
So, yeah, Citizens United. I just want to make sure people know what this is. It was more of a, what is it? And again, the Supreme Court decided that corporations have a voice. Now, I'm a small business person, and when I see these huge amounts of money coming to the campaigns, I am not happy about this at all. As seen, recently in the Tribune and others, $71,000 was spent on former Representative Swatsky's campaign already this year from one organization. That's $71,000. That's more than I can spend on everything in a campaign, as well as Mary. So what's interesting is they're all jumping on this thing. I'm not happy about it. I wish it could change, but this is a federal issue, and it needs to be dealt with on the federal level. I'm happy to make some changes to something, but I can't when it's that far in Washington.
Okay. Thank you. Mary?
After 78 pieces of literature was mailed throughout the district in 2013, or in the 14 race, I am absolutely saddened that this is how what politics is now where we're at. It's a sin, it's a crime to be spending this much money on campaigns. Unfortunately, I have been very blessed to have small donors help me with my campaign. I am not accepting PAC money. I am not accepting any lobbyist money. I did in 2015 get one from our former senator and a friend who is a lobbyist, totaling $150. So you can find that. But other than that, my money has been raised by small donors. We need to work together. We are the state of Minnesota. I don't like to have influence from out of state. The realtors from Chicago has no business being in Minnesota. When we don't know who the titles are of these organizations, we need to expose that. That needs to have transparency. Just like the Campaign Finance Board, if you spend, $250, you're exposed. Anything under $249, you do not have to have it listed on the Campaign Finance Board report. So I think there are some ways that we can handle some of our small organizations that are opposed to limiting this, but that will be something that I will work on in the legislature, I promise you, in 2016.
Andrew?
Well, I think Citizens United is going to go down in history as we look back as one of the worst decisions in the country's history. The idea that corporations are people is laughable, and I just asked the people a question, how is it free speech when you pay for it? When corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence the outcome of our elections, it completely corrupts and corrodes the process. People lose faith in the elections. And people get so upset because basically it pays for negative ads. A couple things here. There are things we can do at the state level. I support the Disclose Act. Both the Republicans up here voted against that. That would have required the disclosure of all the donors who are funding these negative ads. And I also want to see legislation pushed at the state level that would prohibit corporations from spending in our elections. Now, perhaps it gets challenged in the courts, but I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. And I want to talk about some of the special interest money that came in. 2 years ago, the Republican State Leadership Committee collected, it was more than $2 million from tobacco companies. And in 2016, the numbers we've seen more than $1 million by tobacco companies funneling money to the Republican State Leadership Committee. That money, in 2014, the Republican State Leadership Committee then funneled $355,000 to the Minnesota Jobs Coalition, which was basically the attack arm for the Republican candidates. They spent a lot of money against me. And when people like Mr. Miller got into the legislature, what did they vote for? They voted for a basically $35 million tax cut for tobacco companies. It's pay-to-pay politics at its absolute worst.
Tim?
That's funny, Andrew. You just said a whole bunch of nothing right there. Is it a lot of money? Yes. Is it gaudy? Yes. But it's a Supreme Court decision that we're talking about here. We can't change a Supreme Court. It's ironic that there's all this attack money on my opponent when out of the gate 2 years ago, my wife's own union attacked me. The first day that I was in session, there was a camera trained on me and it was on video the next day. We don't seem to be hearing about that sort of stuff. This is the big world. This is things that unfortunately politics can get a little bit dirty. But trust the people. Trust them to know what the right decisions are, who the right person is. Talk to the people. Get to meet them, get to know them. I have full respect for the voter and believe that they're going to be able to know who to vote for, what's going on, despite all this. Do we like this negative stuff? No. I don't like it. It's very apparent from all of us up here that we don't care for it either. I want to make a correction because he floats some things out there that are not germane to the question. We gave no tax cut to big tobacco, okay? He's making this up. It's a twisting of words, and it starts to get offensive when you continually throw out these little lies. So please stop.
Now, I want to ask one more question because we've had a lot from the audience, and when they take the time to write the question, we need to get it out there. But I need you to limit the amount of time you do that, and we're also going to have you cut down your closing statements as well. What do you think would be the most effective way to fund completion of the 4-lane Highway 23? Mary.
Come up with a long-term transportation plan. If the folks at the table when we were at the Transportation Alliance meeting, nobody would talk about even any kind of increase in a state tax I'm not saying that I'm for a state tax. I'm saying I can consider that, and I'd like to visit with the folks, and I am visiting with the folks at the doors. They want it done. We need it for safety. We need it for economics. We need it for bringing professionals out to the state of to Kandiyohi County.
Andrew?
The Highway 23, I'll talk about Highway 212 because I think that's more relevant. Well, they're both relevant to the district, but it's going to require some combination of new revenues to go and address the need. And that maybe bonding could be a possibility, but it's probably unlikely because that's been leveraged up. So it's going to require some combination of new revenues that's going to have to be done in a comprehensive statewide manner.
Yeah, and I think that we've had the conversation that we need to find new revenues specific to 23. There were 3 that were earmarked, 23, 12, and 14. And the reason why they're earmarked is because these were projects that were long overdue, and they I think MnDOT does a fantastic job in their system by which they grade and decide what the priorities are is what we need to stick to. I have had some legislation passed out of the House that addressed that and gave some priorities to 212. But I do think we need to find the ways to be able to get this stuff funded, because I think we all agree that, specific to your question on 23, it needs to be funded.
Dave?
Yep, I would agree. Again, I worked really, really hard to get the Highway 23, the first 7 miles in the bonding bill this last year. We were able to do that because we actually had some surplus to work with. Minnesota was coming together again. We did some good bonding planning on that. There was some highway priorities on Highway 12 and as well as Highway 14. I'm going to continue to keep fighting for that. And again, like I mentioned before, it's going to require some reforms, some new ideas, and we have to get something done to make sure this happens. So again, we're going to cut our time short, but we're going to make sure this is a big part of our priority.
Thank you. This concludes the question and answer part of the program, and so we'll begin with closing comments, and Mary, that starts with you.
Progress begins November 8th, and I want to be part of that progress. I will fight for a long-term transportation bill. I will continue to be a champion on mental health issues in Minnesota's fractured system. I will provide incentives for job creation, and I am very interested in helping mend and find solutions for broadband internet access so that all Minnesotans, all educators, all students, farmers, small business, large business have the access that they need for broadband internet services. Finally, I will work to change transparency in the state of Minnesota. And as my opponent had said, that when he went to St. Paul, he would, quote, "I will change the laws to limit the horrible negative ads that are ruining our political process." And so as Assistant Majority Leader, you had a lot of time and a lot of ability to show and step up on Highway 23, on a bonding bill. And we haven't seen it from a leader. I think what you need to do is be a legislator for the citizens of 17B.
Thank you. Andrew?
Well, thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. And I think one of the most important things here is we have to get the corporate money out of politics. And just to get back, Tim, you did vote to cut taxes on tobacco products. That's a tax cut for big tobacco. Go back and check the bill if you want.
You're wrong.
We need to go and move past the gridlock. We need progress over gridlock. If anybody thinks this last biennium was a success, I've got some oceanfront properties to sell you in Kandiyohi County. The failure to get a tax bill, a bonding bill, and a long-term comprehensive fix for roads and bridges is frustrating. Minnesotans are upset. When we were last there, when Mary and I were last there in 2013, 2014, we got the job done on time, on budget. We paid back every penny that had been borrowed from the schools. We passed a large and strong comprehensive bonding bill. We did a lot of good work and got the job done without the need for special sessions, without the threat of government shutdowns. Politics is about improving people's lives, and we have to remember that we all do better when we all do better. Thank you for the time. My name is Andrew Falk, and I appreciate your consideration and hope to earn your vote.
Tim?
So the message that I've heard tonight and I've heard from other times is that we did nothing, there's gridlock, government doesn't work. So here's some of the things that government did not work for in the past 2 years, and these are just a couple. Nursing homes, apparently they're nobody. Veterans, turkey growers, McRae, farmers, Milan, countless individuals with problems that were brought to me. These are just things that I personally worked on. Some of the things we didn't get done. We stopped the euthanasia bill. We had no new taxes. It should be noted that in 2013 and 2014, there was no transportation bill either that year. We talk about how we scuttled the transportation bill. There was none in 13-14. There was, in the last minutes of a session, because we do nothing in last minutes, there was a $90 million Senate building that was in the dark of night. So government can be ugly, it can be difficult. We live in a system to where it's supposed to be difficult to pass new things. I promise to work hard. My name is Tim Miller, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you again, Jan, and the League of Women Voters for tonight's forum. This is always helpful for me to hear from you directly. As I really get out so much in the community to talk to neighbors, again, I'm hearing our priorities are far and wide. I worked really hard on broadband. I carried the bill in the House for $35 million. Came with some reform. We actually worked with the unions, the trade unions, for some prevailing wage stuff that really helps get more homes broadband. But this takes a little bit of time. It doesn't just happen overnight. But the money is in the office, and there's a record number of applications being processed. I'm happy about my support for education, public education. I am very happy with a lot of the things that we did. I'm also just realized today that I was told some information that, Dave, you voted about 83% with your caucus, which means that I didn't go with my caucus all the time. I was also the 5th most bipartisan guy in the House of Representatives. Out of 134 members, I did pretty good working across the aisles. I will continue to do that. I am grateful to have this job as your state rep. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my remarks short as well, but the League does want to remind the citizens of Willmar that and around the area that they're, in addition to voting for the candidates on November 8th, there's also a constitutional amendment. And so there was an article in the paper today regarding that. The League is not taking a stand one way or the other, but we are encouraging people to check the Secretary of State's website, and you should get some useful information. The other thing to remember is if you don't vote on that particular amendment, it will be reflected as a no vote. So it's important to know that. Also, your opportunity to request an absentee ballot in the mail it ends Friday, October 6th. So thank you to the candidates. Thank you to the leaguers that were here tonight helping. Also to this awesome audience that's here. Obviously, there's an interest in these races, and we do appreciate the time and the effort you guys put into running to represent us. So thank you again. You can also see this program live on wilmermn.gov, the city website, RAC 18 and 181, on demand KWLM radio, and the city website. KWLM is taping it so that they can use this in the future while the campaign is going on, and also to West Central Tribune for the articles that they have had. We're really pleased with the coverage that they've done. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.